Hi, everybody. This is Quick Answers with Ida, and Dana is helping me, of course. And we're here together. And for any of you that don't have time to come onto our live Q&A, we collect up all of your questions, and you're always welcome to send us stuff. And we get them all together, and then we give you some quick answers. So here we are. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Ida. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little croaky, you can hear, so you'll have to just excuse my voice.
So today I have gathered all the questions that we have received about Spurs. So this will be our Spurs episode. And I know recently I had some questions about Spurs, so I thought this would just be a good topic to cover. So the first question I have, several of my friends wear Spurs at intro. My test says needs energy. Should I use Spurs?
Wow, that's a really good question. And we actually kind of get that a lot. And especially in Western Dressage, because there's kind of a history of cowboys wearing spurs. So good question. Um, we really, really have to be careful about our auxiliary aids. And when I talk about auxiliary aids, whips, spurs, you really want to be sure, and especially this gal that wrote in for intro, please, my friend, can you work really hard with your trainer or whoever helps you or your girlfriends that help watch you ride or whatever, and be really sure that you can get your horse active and forward to a normal, traditional, soft leg aid without the spur. Because, at intro, theoretically, we're just walking and jogging. And that's not to say that you might not ever need a spur, but it does concern me if you're at intro and you need a spur. They're legal and you're allowed to have one, but we really want horses to be cheerful, harmonious in front of our aids. And so that can really be that you might need a little bit of help with your equitation. Just be sure your alignment's good, that you actually have your leg on the sweet spot. We have our great video on horse biomechanics, which explains that to you with some other experts besides me and some great drawings and diagrams. But it will really help you to understand exactly the muscles that you want to activate with your lower leg, with your calf, and to stimulate the horse to go more forward and be willing to go forward. So when a horse doesn't go forward to a light leg, it concerns us. So we want you to do that. We want you to explore correct equitation, be sure the horse is comfortable, be sure it's sound, explore every avenue and maybe talk to your trainer, riding instructor, your friends that you're riding with. Hey, let's go out on a trail ride today and make the other girl go first so your horse goes faster after, and keep working on your leg aids and kind of getting your horse to go forward, and use some cross training to get your horses forward, and be sure that you're not relying just on a spur. With that being said, if you get to a point where you need one, they're allowed. And we don't mark down people that are wearing a spur. So don't take it the wrong way. But riding is all about us communicating clearly. And a lot of times when a horse doesn't go clearly forward just from your leg, and especially in the low levels, because the work at that level is just kind of like walk jog and then walk jog lope and basic. And we're kind of expecting a well-broke, well-mannered horse to go just from soft aids. So really explore everything before you resort to that. And of course, you're allowed to use a bat or a whip if 47.2 inches or shorter, short. You're allowed to use one gently, no audible noise, and you can, sometimes some horses, if you need an auxiliary aid, sometimes just if a horse will tolerate it, a lot of times people just pick up a bat or a whip. They don't even use it. They're just carrying it and the horse goes forward. And that means that they don't have to use a spur, because now when you begin to use a spur, you really got to have trained legs. Your legs have to be in really good position, because if they're not, then you're hitting that horse all the time with the spur instead of with your leg. And that's why we encourage you to work on your equitation and go as far as you can without a spur, so that we're sure that you're working really a lot on your horsemanship and that our harmony, we have a very high harmony degree in the training of our horses in Western dressage. So we're hoping for that. So if you don't have to, could you please explore all these other options before you consider that? That's my best advice.
That's great advice. I really like that. And that hit home for me because we have been working on my equitation and where my legs should be and kind of just starting to use spurs a little bit. And that's new to me. And it has been very helpful because, I do have a worry of, am I using them properly and everything? So having you watch some of my videos of me riding and giving me advice makes me feel a lot better about using that piece of equipment properly. The second question I have is, what kind of spurs should I use? And do judges prefer us to wear Western spurs?
Yes, we have a large assortment of spurs that are allowed in Western dressage. And it's so funny because people come up to me and they go, well, so and so's wearing English spurs. And if they don't know our rules really well, sometimes they're like, gee, those aren't legal. And most of them are. We have a large assortment of spurs that are allowed. In fact, a lot of the English spurs are very small, discreet, so they're not noticeable particularly. And so there's some really good selections in that group, and I would hate to not have them available to me, to tell you the truth. Some of them are really light on your boots, so there's a lot of really interesting things about some of those particular brands. And if you think about our Western history, like so many of the men that were referred to as cowboys, Western, and we think of Western, um, and they were stock workers and stuff, but they were people who came out of the Civil War and moved west, and they were also, freed Black men who were disenfranchised and needed work and were excellent cattlemen and excellent horsemen. And they were likely to have cavalry equipment just as likely as they were to have more what we think of as stock saddles, which tend to be a little bit more in Spanish style. And so our heritage of Western attire in the West is not really based on what you think of as Western pleasure per se, because it was such a large variation of tack after the Civil War. It was just amazing. And so uh, the fact that we allow so many of these pieces of equipment is just fascinating. I know I'm wandering, so I better get back to the subject, but what do I personally use? I actually prefer any kind of a spur which is not sharp. I have never, ever in a lifetime used anything pickety. It's out for me. There's some that are legal out there, and I'm a judge and I have to be blind to that. But me personally, you will never, ever see that. And I don't allow it in my students. I don't like
Would you call that on a Western spur a rowel? Is that
a rowel. And,
okay?
a rowel is the part on the stem that goes
Okay.
around, but some of the rowels are just smooth like a dime. But we
Yep.
do have some that they have prickers on them. They're not super prickery, but they're there. I
Mhm.
personally don't use those. No. I am very interested in spurs that you can lay the side of the spur against the horse. How you use a spur is very interesting. You can press it against a horse, you can slide it against a horse, you can move it around on a horse. And people are always thinking about just sticking them. But when you are trained by somebody that really knows the nuances of using a spur, they begin to talk to you about how to apply it, where to put it, how it's used. Personally, I like spurs that when you lay them against the horse and you can roll them. So there is a version of an English spur that has a neck and a little tiny round plasticky ball, a little black ball that's plastic. I like those. I use them a lot, and they have short necks and longer necks for horses that their barrels are different shaped, or even riders that are on really big horses but have short legs, so their legs are further away from the barrel of the horse and they have trouble cupping their legs around the horse. They may need a longer neck on the spur. Spur sizes for horses and riders, the neck length of a spur, and there are um, allowances, tolerances that make spurs illegal if they're too long. So there are always, you have to watch your spur rules. But so those vary, and you find a spur that's appropriate for a horse and rider. I always start with very short spurs because the shorter the spur is, the shorter the neck is, the less likely the rider is to actually use it. The longer they
Yeah.
are, the they're inadvertently possibly could inadvertently touch them. So I start people with very short spurs. So anything that rolls, I like. If you have to have a little sharper one, there is one that with a dime. I don't probably use those once in a lifetime, but I do have some. And swan neck spurs are spurs that go up and in towards the horse, and those are appropriate for people that the horses really dip away from your leg, and your leg, even at the lowest part, is a long way from the horse, and you don't want the rider to have to lift their heel up a lot to utilize the spur, and they would possibly like to not actually take the end of it. They want to press the side of the spur against the horse, this type of thing. Swan spurs are interesting. So, but there's also just almost like fake little, we have some little Western ones that are just like a piece of um, wire. That sounds bad because it's thicker than that, but it's just a little bumpy thing that it's almost like just your boot is bumpy. It's like almost like a fakey spur, you know. We have some really benign spurs, Western and English, which can be used if you just need a little help. And so some of these are some of my favorites, just ones that are very benign, and you need to take some time with someone who's experienced, your riding instructor, your trainer, other experienced friends may be able to talk to you about, oh, when you sit on the horse, you know, what length of spur do you need? Also, where to put it on your boat appropriately, how to get it on there correctly, whether it's Western or English, to get it on there. So that can be a wonderful education, and it can be a conversation to have
Mm.
together and to learn about. Um, the one thing that I should have mentioned before about the gal that asked the question about intro, you know, one of the reasons that most of us are so interested in not using the spurs too much in the lower levels of Western dressage development is that, first of all, we want the riders to get their education on their equitation superior, your legs really good, so that, you know, when you are kind of bumping around with your legs, that you're not accidentally hitting them with the spur. And there is even, hey, I've ridden all the way up all the levels, and I can tell you, if you wear a spur every day, if you do, eventually you succumb to using it. It's like power. You can't help yourself, you begin to rely on it more. And so even a horse that kind of needs a spur, I only put it on when I'm going to spur something. I'm sorry, not going to spur, but I'm going to work something specific that I know I need a little bit of help with. I will not ride a horse every day for years in spurs. I won't do it because it means that I will get lazy. It's like cruise control. And you get to the point where whether you intended to or not, you begin to rely on it more than you should. And so you lose more and more lower leg contact. When you go to second level, to level 5, you have to have a lot of collection, and the horse has to be able to lift up its back, and you have to engage the thoracic. If you have been riding the horse with only spurs to go forward, now you have no extra RPMs or energy or help with the collection, or let's say a very complicated, um, maybe like half pass, you just need a tiny little bit more response from that horse from your leg to bend around it. And you would just like to, you put your leg on, and no matter what you do with it, they just kind of not as supple as you'd like. And you'd like to just press the spur or roll it against them a little bit to get a little more response. If you haven't saved it for the end products of the finesse that you need for the collection engagement and high level work, you have no tools left in your toolbox. You want to save those tools. And if you're one of the lucky riders and horses that you have such an amazing horse that you don't ever need to pick up a spur and use it on it, and there's a few of those out there, and we're so lucky in life if we ever find one of those, congratulations to us, and enjoy it. And in the meantime, for the rest of us, the real world, save those tools and use them very sparingly. And when the horse responds well to that tool, be sure to reward them. Give them a pat, give them a break, tell them they were great, because it's really cool.
No, that is really good advice. I love that. I know that we've definitely talked about spur length, what I need, and then just trying them out and seeing what works. I know that I tried a pair of spurs and, I got back to you and said, you know what? Like I think I liked riding in those. And you just said, that's okay. Try something different, like something a little shorter. Because I felt like my leg wasn't still enough. Maybe the spur was a little too long. I said, I think I'm catching him in the side. I don't want to do that. So, let's try a shorter spur. So yeah, thinking about that and having that awareness of the spur. Yeah.
Borrow spurs from your friends before you go buying hundreds of them, because like all trainers and all riding instructors and friends, they have a bunch of spurs that they have tried out, and they throw them in a box because that doesn't work on this horse and this one doesn't like that one. And the nine out of 10 times it's that the shape of the horse's body combined with your leg length and your particular boot that you're wearing, and how it's where it goes on you, and whatever, it's the wrong length, it's the wrong shape, it's the wrong size. And I'm really a proponent of minimalistic spurs. Like, if you don't need them, don't. If you do need them, pick out something that is the most harmonious and
Mhm.
use it sparingly,
Yeah.
very sparingly.
Yeah. So you don't want to bring light to those spurs. Well, I know that you have a story about noisy spurs. I know you see lots of things in the show ring and everything. Can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a weird story. So I hope you'll be patient. I hope our viewers will be patient because it's kind of strange. But I was at a really long show, and there was a person that came in, and she was showing multiple days. So after a while, you're like, oh no, it's the woman with the really noisy spurs. And we're in a huge coliseum, and there's people in the stands, and they're playing music, and I'm 200 feet from her because it's a long ring, and I can hear those spurs, and it's like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I never thought about it. I have a pair of Western Spurs. I almost never wear them. But these particular Spurs on this particular woman, I don't know if it was the Spurs, how she had them adjusted, really loud, really jangly. So here's the thing that was it really struck me. First of all, every time she had a tempo change, those Spurs changed. And I was like, why am I noticing this woman's tempo change? Like, it was in my face because those spurs, it was like a bad guy walking down the saloon floor. You could hear it, And I was like, she has no idea that it's a dead giveaway. It wouldn't be so noticeable. I might have missed it if it hadn't been for the spurs.
So
I'm
does
just
that mean that like you were marking down for not having a steady tempo because it's just brought to light? Like,
it slapped me in the face. I mean, I'm not sure. Judges catch things, but
Mhm.
this was so in your face, you
Got
couldn't
it.
miss it. And then the next part was, By the second or third day, my scribe, who was with me every day, she's cheerful about everybody. She's very good about not making any comments. She was a best, awesome, awesome scribe. But it was sort of like the woman with the Spurs again. And I'm thinking she never comments on anybody. You know, and when we went to lunch, I said, you know, you never say anything. And we're not really supposed to say too much to each other about that. And we're not supposed to recognize anybody. We're trying not to recognize anybody because we're trying really hard not to recognize people. But she's recognizing this woman. And I finally said to her, what caused that? Do you know what caused that? And she goes, she thought about it. And then she was like, oh my gosh, like I have anxiety when she comes in. And I'm like, what? And it's kind of like, well, it's like scraping on a chalkboard.
Mhm.
And it was like, we can't, you know, she was like, I can't wait for it to be done because the scribe can't look up. So she's writing and she can hear it. And it's just like, it was like fingers on chalkboard. And I thought about it and I thought to myself, I wonder what that's all about. But I'm very, very self aware. I'm a very sensitive kind of gal. And I think more about the psychology of making sure that external influences do not influence your judging because I'm just one of those people that external influences you have to guard against this when you're a judge. And I realized that I also had anxiety and I was having to guard against anxiety while she was in the ring. And I thought about it and I go, you're completely trained by American Westerns. You never hear Spurs jangling that anything good is going to happen. It's sort of like Harry Potter bad music. Here comes the bad guy. Here comes the snake. How about the shark music? And so when you hear Spurs jangling, it was never a good guy.
Mhm.
It was a bad guy. And it was,
Yeah.
and if you heard that, and I thought, it's so ridiculous. Like, this is a crazy thing. But I was like, well, I'm going to go home and tell every single person I know, like, if you have jangly Spurs, get them off.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
So,
yeah, the
because
awareness of that, because
at
I
least
mean,
I'm
who could be riding
self-aware.
around and
Yeah.
not know?
Once I realized that I could hear her tempo change, I had to really unfocus that because the other people don't have that. So it was like I had to make myself deaf in order to, you know, be sure I was judging evenly somehow. But the
Mhm.
problem with that is how many things do you need the judge? How many things are you asking the judge to try to overlook and screen out while they're busily trying to judge you? You,
Mhm.
you know, it's not, I don't think anyone's ever thought about that. You know what I mean? It's like we have talked to you a lot about swinging things and things that dangle down behind the horse's legs and all
Yeah.
these things and floppy fringe that's really long that makes there was, you know, that makes people think that um, a rider possibly their seat isn't as good as it is when they have a really good seat, but the fringe is really floppy. So I have to screen that out to judge them correctly. How
Yeah.
many things do you expect me to screen out while I'm trying to judge you correctly? And I only have like 4 to 6 minutes. I don't have long.
Yeah.
I
So
want,
be aware of those things that draw attention the wrong way.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
That's
exactly,
so right.
exactly. You want to have positive um, experiences in the ring.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they have so little time to evaluate them. If they, you don't want to distract them with anything.
Absolutely. Well, this was great advice about Spurs because if you've never ridden in Spurs and you think you might need to, it's just great advice to know all these different things, the different types of Spurs, because my gosh, when you start looking, there are so many different types of Spurs and English and Western and this and that. And I didn't even think about length until you said something to me the other day and where my foot sits and the barrel of my horse and it was just so much and such good advice. And I think this was just an amazing episode on Spurs. And what I'm going to do is get some pictures of all the Spurs that you recommend. And we'll post them right after this video so everybody can get a visual of what some of those look like. Western versus non-Western, that are all legal.
That's a great thing to do is just, if you're even contemplating this, what we're just saying is it's totally okay. We totally get it. Just really think it over, get some help and go slowly at the introduction to the horse can be a real thing. So go slowly at it. Start with the most benign thing you can find and just be thoughtful about how you do this because it can be an amazing tool. It can, but it has to be used properly. As we know, all tools should be used properly.
Yes. Well,
Until next time, all of you, thanks for sending questions, and we will talk to you again soon. And Dana, it's always great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
you too. Thank you so much, Ida.
Take care.